My mom came over here and married over here. So left everything she knew. And she was 25 when she had me. So 23 years old when she came over. She was a nurse. And the funny thing is my dad took it upon himself to make sure that my mom was a true American woman. And, in his mind, American women were the ones who could do anything they wanted and they didn't have any restrictions and there's no ceiling. So he made sure that she had a bank account, she had investments. He made sure he hired a AAA driver who happened to be a Jewish man, apparently, who was super mean and made her cry, but wanted to make sure that this driver instructor taught her how to drive. So he wanted to equip her, and she didn't know what the heck this man was doing. They had only been together for a little while. But I think about that. I think about the importance of setting people up to be great. And the other thing that I wanted to share is that my mom is a very quiet woman. So not like me. Very quiet and very wanting to be in the background. And she had 2 daughters. And what she did is what I think that we must do for each other is she made sure her goal was to make sure that I never felt afraid, that I always spoke up, and that there was always room for me to pursue what I wanted to pursue. And so I think it backfires sometimes when we talk over her and we argue with her, and sometimes we ignore things. But I think that she wanted to make sure that we had everything that she didn't have. And I'm so thankful for her because of that, because I think you need to have some of these qualities to be able to succeed in the marketplace. And it's something, I have 2 daughters and I'm making sure that they have that as well. So it's a subject near and dear to my heart, that women are able to succeed based on their ability to excel and just their talents and their perspectives, and they're very much needed. So I'm very excited to introduce our first panelist and be inspired and learn from her. So Jackie Johansen, who is the principal of Shattered Glass Development and Shattered Glass Equity. So it must be important to you if you have it in the name of the company. So welcome, and let's hear a little bit about you and why you feel that this is so important. Oh.
Liz, my technology maybe, there was a little glitch. Could you just say that again?
Yeah, I'm just it's your turn. And so I just want to hear, basically, why did you name it Shattered Glass? You obviously have a perspective and an opinion about this subject. So can we start there?
Absolutely. So when I decided to start Shattered Glass Development, I reached out to a lot of women in a network that I'm a part of called Crew Network. And we're mostly women. There are some male members, but mostly women in the commercial real estate industry. And in commercial real estate, are you investing in commercial real estate? Are you progressing in your leadership roles in commercial real estate? And similar to what were my answers were, no. I wasn't investing in commercial real estate, and I wasn't, progressing as I was excited to eventually do to become a leader in commercial real estate. So as I talked with more and more women and heard more and more no's and no's, I just thought, this is an exciting time to put together, go forward, put that uncomfortable step forward, and start this company and encourage women and young professionals and those that aren't necessarily invited to the table to take a step forward and do something a little bit different. So that's what caused me to start Shattered Glass Development and then Shattered Glass Equity.
So what are some of the reasons that women don't get involved in this part of real estate, or just owning? Like, what are the things that we think that's just culturally in our mindset where we just don't even think it's an option, much less being held back from something.
It's a great question. And, really what it comes down to, because I was also asking a lot of men, how did they get into the industry and how did they start investing in commercial real estate? And most always they were invited in. So commercial real estate has been around for a very long time, and and it still is a male-dominated industry. There's more women now, but they were simply invited in by other men. So they didn't have to figure it out. They were invited to the table. And it was as simple as that, really. So women didn't know, including myself, we didn't know how to get in the game.
So do you feel like, so a new generation, is it just easier? Are there just more opportunities? And so it just feels like a obvious next step, or does that invitation still need to happen?
It does. It does. I would say many women and young professionals that I talk to, either because it's the team that they're working with, or they just aren't in a role where necessarily they get invited to that table. That definitely still exists, which is one of the reasons I started Shattered Glass Equity, because that invites investors to look at investment opportunities, and then they can make decisions and speak directly to the developers and learn more about the opportunities at that point. And they just have to know to go to the website. They don't have to have a special invitation.
Yeah, that's great that you built it into your system. So I have one question, potentially a little salacious, but I'm thinking about when you're a woman and as a person of color, whenever I put it out there, I'm acknowledging this is the thing. We're not going to tiptoe around this. I mean, when you name your company, the thing that you are trying to change, do you ever get any backlash? Does anyone ever go, maybe they had one too many whiskeys and they start saying something about your card or whatever?
Definitely. I've had actually a teacher of a continuing education class that I took that said, why would you want to name your company Shattered Glass when you're tearing things down and you're destroying things? And why would you want to give that mental image? And I said, well, that's exactly why I'd want to give that mental image, because it's time to break the glass ceiling. And so many women before us have started this progression. And it's exciting to me. And yes, I would also say that every once in a while, I get a little bit of pushback, usually from men saying, really, is it always about the glass ceiling? And no, it's not always about the glass ceiling, but it does exist.
I think I think that that's a wonderful thing to just put it out there and, just make it so that it's not a dirty secret. It's like something that's really happening that we have to be intentional about. So I'll end on this before we move on. What is the advice that you would give someone who, and it doesn't really matter what industry it is, but what do you want? I have a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old. Can you give them some advice? They're going to be in the workforce before we know it. And what do we want them to take that we had to learn the hard way?
Oh, that is a wonderful question. I think what I would say to that is don't put any barriers on your own self. So, I have kids very similar in age to yours. And, probably in their freshman year, they start taking these placement tests that tell them you're very well suited for this, or you're very well suited for that. But maybe that's not where your passion lies. So I would just say, what I would say to that next generation is don't put barriers on your own self.
That is such good advice. So thank you, Jackie, so much. There will be some time, hopefully at the end, if you think of something else that you want to say, which often happens in a panel situation. So if we need to circle back, we will, because I feel like I could talk to you for longer than a few minutes. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Very good.
All right, well, we are going to move to our next panelist, which is Christine Osborne. You've already seen her. She's the general manager for Christopher's Fine Jewelry. And I wanted to say, okay, so more, it's a little less obvious that, you know, I would say jewelry is female friendly, that there are probably not as men buying jewelry for themselves and thinking, you know, when we say drenched in diamonds, you don't imagine my dad, you would imagine my mom. But at the same time, you have so much to offer. And my interest, like I have a little of my own interest, because I think about when I first started working, and I thought I felt like Mary Tyler Moore. I had my own parking spot downtown, across from, it was Equitable of Iowa at the time. It became ING. And I really wanted to twirl in the middle of like 9th and Locust and say, I'm here. And I dressed the way I thought I needed to be successful. And I spoke the way I thought I needed to. I picked up that super strident kind of like, you better listen to me right now kind of voice, which I think a lot of women can relate to, that you have this alter ego super women. So tell me, because you are a self-professed, perhaps introvert, I mean, maybe a introverted extrovert kind of deal. So I want to know about how you have learned to communicate successfully as a woman, and what you've seen. Like, what is the ceiling that you have experienced?
Sure. Well, today, I wanted to just give a little background to me and our business. And as a general manager of Christopher's Fine Jewelry and Rare Coins, which is the whole of our business, I managed a business for our owner who is retired. So he retired in 2013, and the jewelry and coin business is very traditionally male, as far as like what we would call our business partners, our coin dealer friends, where we would need to get our jewelry from. You know, those of you in the room that understand kind of that retail, where do you get stuff from, right? Like, we have to deal a lot with men. And even in just dealing with some of our clients that say, Chris managed the business, or he still owns it, 30 years in the business, right? Now, all of a sudden, here is me, little, young me, little, and we'll say that because I've heard lots of young lady along the way. But I had to learn quickly, you know, well, Chris didn't do it that way, or Chris did, or Chris showed, or, you know, and there was a lot of those that we had to overcome. So in that, to answer your question about communication, I had to learn, really, you have to listen first. Where are they coming from? What do they really need? What is really the issue? And the more questions you can ask, the better responses you will give. So listen first, seek to understand. You know, we always, did anybody's mama ever say, you've got one mouth and two ears? As salespeople, we were trained to really listen. And I found that the more that I would listen to these gentlemen that I, you know, dealt with Chris for years, the more I would listen, the better it got. And I would love to speak a little bit to some of those cultural differences, Liz, that you spoke about. Very traditionally, Jewish men were diamond dealers in the city of New York. Everybody talk about, you know, 47th Street, New York. Very traditionally, men were the decision makers there. And today, the country of India is becoming much more involved. So we had to learn, and particularly me, what were the cultural differences, and not get offended, because culturally that may be appropriate for how they talk, or how they would suggest a deal be done, or how they would want to communicate with you. I would say, don't be quick to be offended until you learn some of the cultural differences. And that was a real game changer for me when I understood some of their community and how they work together. Then I was able to ask better questions and learn more. Understanding that the relationship that you have is the most important thing. And at the end of the day, we still want that relationship to be there. So how are we going to honor that? Even if there's differences and conflict, always remember, what's the goal? What's your goal at the end of the day? Do we still want to be in business together? Do we still want this client to be a client of ours, even though he's insistent that Chris would have done that deal a little differently? At the end of the day, the goal is, I want that gentleman to still be a part of our business. So you have just kind of have those things in the back of your head all the time.
Oh, I think there's so much to unpack. You said so many good things. Which thing do I pick? I have so many pretty things in front of me. I just want to touch on one thing that I find really interesting, and this is not the point of this necessarily, but when you talk about dealing with other cultures, I think that we are entering a new phase of things, of being so connected globally.
Yeah.
And it is surprising the more that we are able to do it. And one thing that I learned early on, because I was born here, but my parents are from India and have relatives in India, that there's no interrogative in Hindi or Malayalam, which are the two big languages. So they don't say, can you do this? They say, you will do this. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Imagine if you didn't have a question mark and you had to communicate, it would feel like someone's bossing you. And when you are working, you're holding your space in a group, I'm sure that can be a challenge. But tell me about, I'd love to know about the thing about building relationships, but being authentic. So women are so good at building relationships, but sometimes we are not as authentic as we could be. We like put the authenticity away so we can build the relationship, and we're holding all of our own things. So tell me about, because you obviously have been doing this a long time and you've built amazing relationships and you are yourself. I can tell that from the minute I talk to you that you are just being you. And so how do you maintain that, but still maintain your authenticity, relationship, and realness?
Yeah, so it has, those are some of the biggest challenges and biggest headbutts that I've either had with Chris or with some of our business partners, is I am me. And, you know, in the boat, we want to talk about our children. I have a 19-year-old daughter who is a strong-willed, independent, young woman, and she's been accused of being her mother's child. So, I think the things I would say is to stand, you know, you want to stand firm in what you believe in, but still be respectful and courteous. And for some of those times when you're just getting to learn, I will dial that back. And as a salesperson, that's something that I learned over the years, is, you know, you try to mirror who's in front of you. And you kind of try to dial back some of maybe what would be seen as aggressive or assertive in ways, particularly when you're dealing with other cultures, that's not always great. But to be patient, even when it's hard. And, you know, again, I don't ever apologize for who I am. I have, or how I would do business. I have a couple stories of coin dealers that would call Chris hopping mad because, you know, back in the day when he was still in the business and I was working a deal and doing this guy's figures and checking that he was bringing us things to sell. And I was double checking, and he got really mad and he says, you know, Chris doesn't check it that close. And I said, well, I'm spending Chris's money, so I'm going to double check. And I just kept doing my business. And I did at the end of it. And he called Chris and said, well, that girl of yours, you know, she took forever and da 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 da. And he said, really? He goes, well, she was checking my batch and, you know, pulled out things that weren't gold. And he was mad. And Chris was like, really? So you're mad that she found your mistake? All right, buddy, have a good day. We'll talk to you, you know. And so I was really blessed along the way to have, I will say that Chris was my biggest champion, my biggest support all along the way. And I know that's not always the case. And I had some great support from other people that had been friends with Chris for a long time that brought me in and said, you know, you had to get over it. You know, she runs Chris's shop, or this is Chris's girl, you know, take care of her. So I had some really great people along the way that then would stand in with me when I'd have challenges with other people. But I guess sometimes you cannot apologize for who you are, but you always have to be respectful and courteous. My team, if any of them are on the phone, are giggling right now because those are my two words. Were we respectful and courteous 100% of the time? And after that, it'll work itself out.
Yeah, I think your story really shows also the importance of having allies. I know that word is overused, but you know, if someone is applying for a job, one of the requests in leadership should be to have backup, to have, you know, as an interviewee, because I don't think that we can do this alone. I don't think you can
No.
shatter ceilings alone.
No.
And it's really, I'm triggered by the coding, you know, when someone says that girl, or, you know, when you have to, and I'm like, well, you know, I'm 50, I'm no girl. I've been a girl for a long time. And
I know.
I think women can be, in a good way, can be kind of dangerous if you,
Right.
that's your thing, that they see you as something that you are much bigger than. So I think that it's another inspirational thing. And I think all of us deal with it. How do you hold yourself accountable, but also be patient and let those things kind of fly by you? So again, if you have more ideas, I know you will, we'll get back to you in the end. I mean, Catherine is there with her eyes, her knowing eyes, saying, we got to go to the next person.
Yeah.
So no, it's good. It's good that you're right there to remind me. I appreciate it. So thank you, Christine, so much. I really appreciate your words. We're going to move on to Mary Thompson, who is the CEO of Avora Group. And she is, I don't remember, Mary, did you have the shoes, or did you have?
I actually, for the record, I have real shoes on.
You do.
I had work to do here. They are perfectly dress appropriate. They're not tennis shoes. They're not slippers.
Very nice. Very nice. So I want to leave you a little time here in the beginning to just talk about, like, why were you asked to do this? You know, like, shattered ceilings, breaking barriers, naming men in this means that everyone is here for a reason. And so tell me, like, why is this a topic of interest for you? And what is your take on this? What do you feel like we need to know?
Well, I would say that most definitely, I run an engineering firm, but it gets much worse because our two operating, the type of consulting firm is we deal with landfills and landfill operators. And then my other company, the other company that I run, is a petroleum services company. So it's all glamour all the time.
A lot of ladies there. That's what you're saying.
No, not at all. Not only are our customers predominantly men, but out of our 50 employees, 40 some of them are men. I would say I've not, just even in looking at it as a barrier or a glass ceiling, I certainly appreciate that, and this was intriguing to me, if for no other reason than maybe a little bit of a different perspective, because honestly, in my career, and I'm pretty old, I've not experienced a glass ceiling that I couldn't, a barrier I couldn't cross, or a ceiling I couldn't shatter through, so to speak. Kind of quoting what Jackie was saying about being invited to the table and making sure that young women know, that sort of thing. That was never a problem to me. I may have been invited to the kids' table, but very quickly I was invited to the real table in my roles, and it's been my honor to do that. And I think that for women in the workforce, and I can speak specifically for my industries, which are very male dominated, being a woman, I've always viewed it as an advantage, to be completely honest. It's never held me back. And I think it's allowed me to interact with our staff and our clients in a way that a man would perhaps be handicapped doing. There's a general ease. I've heard, it said so far twice that, women are, I think, inherently great communicators, and they can draw people out and that sort of thing. I think that the men I have on staff, I mean, the big joke about there's no crying in baseball, that sort of thing. The way that men interact with me is far different than they would interact with a male supervisor. And if something is really bothering them, or they're having a real problem, talking to me about it, it may not always feel appropriate. And I sometimes wish it wasn't, maybe that it didn't get as personal sometimes as it does, but they're far more willing to tell me what is at the root of their actual challenge than if I were a man, because there's the bravado and all of the masculinity that would get in the way of that. So I think that my being a female has done nothing but enhance my ability to lead. And again, it's just, I think that, you know, in my line of work, and before I was doing this, I was working in transportation and warehousing as a controller. I ran the accounting department, and they told me early on that, you know, arguing with the truck driver is like wrestling a pig in mud. Pretty soon you realize the pig is enjoying it. And so I had to hone my skills for being really nimble in tricky situations. And that I brought with me here. And I think it served me well. I just think that not taking yourself seriously is essential. I mean, and so far, you know, I think, you know, this is definitely a male-dominated industry that I'm in, those industries. And being able to allow things to roll off and not take things so seriously is essential. I completely sympathize with some of the challenges that women have. And those things have not happened to me. I have not been abused or held back because of my gender. There's been no harassment like that. And those things are real, and I don't discount those. But verbal inappropriate comments, verbal, hey babe, you know, if it could be said, it's been said to me through the years. And, you know, allowing that, some of that to roll off is also what makes progression and relationship building work. And so, you know, just in some ways kind of being one of the guys. I think it's important for young ladies to realize that everything doesn't have to be so serious, you know, all the time. So that's sort of my story.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And again, so much there, which I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to save a question for later, but I wanted to kind of like float it by you now, which is that the balance between, which I can see the answer in your commentary, but the balance between being a representative of women and being yourself, that's a choice that you have to make, that you have to, it doesn't always have to be that you are Joan of Arc defending all women, that sometimes it's just a matter of handling the situation. And what I'm asking you is, have you ever circled back? Have you ever said, well, I'm going to teach that person not to treat me that way. I'm just not going to teach them right now, which is what I want to ask you, but I need to move forward. And then if you would keep that question, and then Sure. We can answer it later. But thank you so much for being honest, because I think sometimes, you know, as a person of color, sometimes people will ask me, well, how is it out there? And I will say, I experience discrimination all the time. You'd be shocked. But I think that I have been able to work some things to my advantage. And that's okay. Like, you don't have to feel guilty because it isn't as hard for you as it is for someone else. And I think sometimes we feel that way as women. We're like, well, I don't want to have to say this right now, but I think that anyone will appreciate that as they're listening to you. So thank you so much. And we're going to move on to our next panelist, who is Nadja Worth. And she is a sales associate at CBRE Hubble Commercial. And I'm going to out you and say this beautiful woman has a young child. She has one.
He's 10. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. He's 10 months old. So he will be one on July 6th. And it is just flown by. It's crazy.
It doesn't get any better.
I believe you. It's crazy.
The twin boys that are 25, and then, like I said, 19 and 16-year-old. And I really just, I came home from the hospital. And so I want you to introduce yourself and give your take on the subject, because now that we've gone from Jackie to Christine to Mary, you have a little bit of an advantage that you get to kind of shape the narrative that's already been started. But I also want to know what has changed for you being a young mother and also being a professional. And like, what are the things that have shifted for you? Is there anything that, you know, you just want to give us some encouragement about or call out? This is also a time for you to vent. If you want that, we are here for it. So just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're seeing against what other people are experiencing.
Sure. So my name is Nadja Worth, and I have worked for CBRE Hubble Commercial Realty for almost 5 years now. I started in a property management role, and then I transitioned into being a broker in sales full time. And so I do a lot of leasing. I sell buildings for people. I help buyers buy buildings, kind of a little bit of everything. But yeah, it's a very male dominated industry. And when I have looked at, men who are my age and have maybe been in the business as long or as little as I have, and I look at some of the opportunities that they've been given versus some of the opportunities that I've been given, it's not always balanced. And I used to, at the beginning of my career, just let it get to me so much. Like, it just brought me down, like, oh my gosh, like, am I not good enough? Am I not smart enough? This, and that. And I felt like I needed to be a part of this boys club. However, Crew has been like a lifeline to me. And those who are not familiar with Crew, it's commercial real estate women. And it's a group that of, like Jackie said, mostly women that support each other in this industry, help each other out, all of those wonderful things. Crew and my village at Crew have really propelled me and given me the confidence to be where I'm at today, and to have the courage and the confidence to speak up, to show up, to voice my opinion, to ask for a seat at the table if I don't have it. And to not shy away, from those opportunities, and to ask for opportunities. And, being in brokerage as a woman and not having a salary and being 100% commission, being a new mom, even being pregnant and all this was so difficult because there really wasn't anybody that I could talk to that could like relate to what I was going through. Sure, there's moms in commercial real estate, but they either had kids that were out of the house or kids that were in school. So they got into the business around the time where like they didn't, their kid wasn't crawling. For me, it was completely different. Like, I have a baby, so it was hard. But it's been rewarding, and it's really, being a mom has made me feel like I can do anything, especially in my industry. And although it's been challenging, I have really become more in line with my priorities and how I prioritize not just work, but family time and everything else. And a lot of my male colleagues can't relate. A lot of their wives are stay-at-home moms, and they're the ones out there that are working and all that. So they really couldn't relate. So they would give me crap like, "Oh, you're going to be gone how long?" And it was like, "Yeah, I'm going to be on maternity leave. Chill, it'll be fine. We're not saving lives. We're in commercial real estate." So, just building my confidence enough to a point where like, I'm in a place where I can work on what I want, say no to what I don't want to work on, and just be myself and not be afraid of being judged. I think that was one of also my challenges when I started, was like, oh my gosh, how do I relate to these middle-aged men? Like, it was hard. I'm like, I have nothing to talk to them about. I don't golf. I don't care about golf. And so I was trying to like figure out how I can have conversations with them that I could even like relate to them. And I just realized like, there's a lot of ththings that we're not going to have in common, but I'm going to be me. And I like to think I'm easy to talk to and I'm funny. So that's how I'm going to win these people over and get them to give me the time of day. So it wasn't necessarily like feeling like I had to be in the boys club. It was mostly like, I'm going to be who I am. And, I'm going to work my tail off, and I know you're going to want to work with me. And if you don't, then that's okay. So it is challenging. But, to some of the other ladies' points, like being a woman kind of gives you an advantage too. You just have to take advantage of it. And you're not always going to get an invitation, unfortunately, but, ask for one, because I have, the guys will have like golf tournaments and do all this stuff. And again, I'm not a golfer, but I'll be like, why didn't I get invited? You know what I mean? What's up with that? You know, and I would never have the confidence to speak up to things like that if it wasn't for, you know, my village at Crew that's like, you can do this, get out there, do your thing, work hard, you got this. So that's been very important to me.
I love all of it. I think that this is true for many women, that really children end up being some helpful. You get a little bolder.
Yeah,
you have someone
do.
who's depending on you. And I was thinking about everyone, I think everyone on the panel didn't experience tons of discrimination in that sense. A lot of things are much more minor, and it's the way you stand for yourself. The latest statistics are that women still make anywhere between 82 and 85 cents on the dollar, which is unacceptable for doing exactly the same thing. I try to paint that picture for my girls. Like, is it okay that everyone else will get paid till the end of the year, but you're only getting your payout through November? And then that's it. And I think that some of it is about not being taken advantage of, but not accepting the disadvantage that's presented to you. You're like, yeah, that's not my thing. I'm going to take my place at the table. And you mentioned Crew. I've spoken at a Crew event and loved the energy and the support. And that seems to be a theme, connecting everybody, you know, having allies and support. That I think that that's necessary. So I wanted to ask you, and then if anyone else, we're going to move into the question portion, which I think we have like less than 10 minutes for. So if anyone has any questions, put them in the chat. But I wanted to start with this one. I think that women do a lot of things really well. That we have, I don't know what the number is, twice as many thoughts as men do. I think it's probably more. In a day, that we just think. And we're really good at thinking about thinking, which is sometimes a problem, because we're like, is that right? Or so I want to know, what do you do to cut through that? You know, you're second guessing yourself, or you're thinking too hard about something, or, you know, you have a conversation in your head that isn't actually out loud, but you feel like you had the conversation. And to that I would say, and then he would say, and then I would say, like, that kind of thing. What do you do about that? How do you quiet your brain?
I used to literally keep myself up at night over that. And something that just really helped me was like thinking to myself, would my male colleague be overanalyzing this? Would he be overthinking it? Is he going home at night and staying up in bed like, oh, did I say this? Did I say that? What is she going to think? Blah, blah. And the answer, like 99.9% of the time, is no, you know? And so that's what's helped me to quiet that voice. It's like, at the end of the day, I'm going to be who I am, and people are either going to like me or they're not, you know, but I am not going to beat myself up over what their thought of me is. Obviously, I want to be liked and respected, but I quiet that voice in my head as soon as it starts going, because it's like, is this going to matter in 5 minutes? No. 5 months? No. 5 years? Heck no. I'm not even going to remember that, you know, this conversation probably. So it's important to me anyway to look at the big picture and, like, you know, think to yourself, like, why even worry about this? It's not, it's not a huge deal.
Yeah, I think that you gave a couple, I think asking yourself questions is a great technique. Like, would that person have worried about it? And will this matter? Does anyone else have any, an answer to that about the thinking about thinking? Or is Nadja and I the only nutty ones that go to sleep thinking about things that don't matter?
Yeah. Oh my God, remember that thing I did 5 months ago? Oh my God, you know.
Oh, I did that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jackie, do you have something you want to say? Mary?
I do. I would love to share a thought. So when I find myself in that situation, and I also, similar to Nadja, will ask, you know, is the other party in this, you know, conversation, if we call it that, you know, are they thinking about this? But really what helps me is I start to ask myself, what am I meant to learn from this?
Yeah.
So that can look a lot of different ways depending on what the conversation is and who the other member of that conversation is or could be. But that's what I try and redirect my own thoughts to. Okay, I'm in a situation and, you know, in a mental conversation, and what am I meant to learn from this? And I just feel like almost in every scenario, there's something to learn, something to not repeat, or something to repeat, or something to pass on to somebody else, or just to learn internally. So I just try and learn from those things.
That's really good. And you have a healthy dose of learning and don't care. Like part of you has to say, I really don't care, and I'm going to do this, but also I need to be open. Does anyone else have any advice about that? Because I think it's completely, I see nodding heads. I think this is a very relatable thing. The stories in our head. I think the guys might be shocked at how much is going on up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about that. Even, you know, my team of 18, there's men, you know, we've got some guys on the team, and we can tell, okay, he's used his words for the day. He's done with all of us chatty women that need to talk through things, because Ian is not one of those. And so we've talked about this in the past on these things. Like, you have to know your team and know who does want to talk through and doesn't. I am a talker througher of situations. I want to look at it from other angles. I want input. I want, you know, to see I want to get other conversations. But sometimes, you know, when it starts going in my head again and I'm thinking, okay, but then I could do this, I'm always on the, what can I do for the business better? Like, what needs to happen more? And there's always more things than I could get done in a day. So I was taught a long time ago just to write those thoughts down, get them out of your head, and then just peace, and it will come back. And I'm with Jackie, you know, every opportunity with a conversation or in a sales role, if those of you that are in a sales role, my sales manager will always debrief after a sale, good, bad, or otherwise, right? Like, we've had some exciting wins lately, and she goes through those just as detailed as she will when we've not gotten a sale. What can we do better? What can we learn? And her sales team has to learn to talk about it, because that's what makes us better. So if you're talking to yourself in your head way too much, then you've got to get somebody else in the room, but write it down. And is that really important? And sometimes when you're doing your planning, some of those things will come back. Yep, that is important. We need to work on that. And other times it's like, you know what? Nope, let it go. And I've written it down and I've crossed it off and let it go.
That's so good. I do have a question about, like, what is the thing that women do that, if you could just reach in all of our brains and just make that one adjustment for us so that we stop doing it. I'll go first. So the thing that I do that I really work on is when I'm negotiating, that I just zip it, because I'm like, and this is what it costs, or this is what it is. And then I keep talking, and I'm like, and I had to learn how to be quiet, because I'm thinking about their bank account. I'm thinking about all these other things. And I realized they haven't even lifted a finger, and I've given away like $800. So that's my thing, that I had to learn to just be quiet and let them just be uncomfortably silent, and be okay with that person saying no and not liking me. What would you give advice? This is probably the last one. Maybe we'll have, we have another question after that. So just what would you say? Listen, ladies, here's the one, drop this act. This bit is not helping you. What would you give? Mary, I want you to start, because you haven't spoken yet.
Well, I would say, don't give the impression that you don't have the answer and that you can't take the task. Go in head first with all the confidence you can muster, because that's how you're going to get your seat at the table, is with that confidence level. And I think it's very easy as women for us to factor in everybody else's feelings about a situation and how what the perception is going to be. And I think that would be my advice, is just do you.
Good one. Go ahead.
I was going to say, don't take anything personally, and just assume that people have good intentions, even if they don't. You never know what somebody's going through, what their history is, what their background is. If, they could have just had the worst day, the best, you don't know, is my point. Right. Don't take things personally. It's going to help you so much, and it's going to, alleviate a lot of stress. by thinking that way and assuming that, hey, I'm sure they have good intentions. And at the end of the day, if they don't, that's on them. You know,
That's right.
take that monkey off of your back and put it on theirs and let it go.
I think that's true for things related to race and ethnicity, that I assume they have good intentions, but they don't understand the impact. So I do a lot of boundary setting with people. With my mom taught me this like look and this voice and my posture. And I kind of put myself in the place of, you know, I need to tell you something right now. And then, you know, go from there. I want to make sure, I know you probably have more, but I want to make sure we honor the questions that are in the chat, which is, what's your advice for asking for a seat at the table? And then we have a piggyback, which is when all of the people at the table are men. And yet, Mary, go ahead. Go ahead.
I have an input on this, that I think that especially if the people at the table are men, they need you at the table. It is bizarre, and maybe it's just my circumstance through my career, but there was an inability, a complete inability to make decisions until there was a woman at the table. And I think pointing that out, I mean, I honestly mean that, and acknowledged by all of the men at the table once you earn the seat. So I think they need a woman at the table. We're used to making decisions, you know, just inherently, juggling kids, juggling career and work and all of the other things, you know, just listening to what Nadja was saying. I mean, being a mother, it makes you superhuman. Being a sister, being you know, a daughter, all of those things, just they infuse you with an ability to make decisions that I think that paralyze men oftentimes. So I think especially if it's all men at the table.
Yes, I think I hear it. Sorry, I want to just, and then Christine, I think you had something more, but to tell yourself that you belong there and that you are needed, and that you are not asking, you are just taking, for the good of the organization, for the good of the group, you take your place because you have to do it. Go ahead, Christine. I don't want to take over. I'm not on the panel.
No, I think that's fine. And to add to what Mary says, and even Liz too, like, you're doing yourself a disservice, and certainly the company, because someone hired you because you had expertise. I think to add to Mary's point is you have to help them understand what you bring and why. And we are, as women here, talking really openly, and you know, Mary's like, yes, because I am a super mom, I need to be here. But they need to hear in specific ways why what you've got is important. And my other thought to that is be super educated. Seek out ways to become the most educated person in the room, in your industry, for your information, whatever that is. So you are the go-to because you've got the best information. You've read the newest reports. You've got it. So when asked questions, you do have the smart answer. And I think just being willing to speak about what is missing at the table and how you see what you've got can fit.
Valuable.
The other thing is, and I've seen this with, you know, old school, well, what we've got's working and it's fine. Well, and that might be. So then you just have to add to that in respectful and courteous ways, as to not, you know, if somebody bristles because they don't like the way you're saying something, then you've got to work twice as hard to build that bridge and that gap. So that's where I go back to that respect and courteous, and build a relationship. At the end of the day, that relationship is still the most important thing. And just kind of circle back to those things. They're going to want to hear those things.
Absolutely. And I think it's good. I think every woman here could agree that that's not our fight. Like, no one is trying to take something away from someone else. I think that's also true in other kinds of diversity, that this isn't about snatching the chair from someone else. We're not playing duck, duck, gray goose. There's actually enough places at the table. So changing that narrative. Does anyone, but we're going to close with the panel part of this, but does anyone have any last words? My mother is calling, like every time. I should just answer it. Does anyone have anything else? Otherwise, I think, thank you so much for being honest, first of all. And what you'll see is that everyone doesn't have the same experience, and that those experiences do not invalidate each other. it's part of a bigger picture. We all belong together. And so whether or not it's something that is part of your daily experience, or it's something that you have found a way to work around, we're all in it for each other, and we're all here to support each other. Because I think Mary did make a very good point to close on, is that everyone is better when we are together. I mean, I think that that's the thing that we all need to own, that it's our civic duty, it's our responsibility to move forward and be everything that we can be, because it's good for the people that are coming up behind us, first of all, and it's good for the organization. So, Catherine, I'm going to hand it back to you. I think my duties are done.
You're amazing, Liz. You're incredible. I love your spirit. You bring such light to this event and to everything. So this was amazing. You were an incredible moderator. When I first called Liz, she said, you know, I do mostly just, you know, talks. You do TED Talks, I do talks by myself, but the moderation, you're incredible. No, you're multi-talented in so many ways, and we've all been texting how great you are. So you've added such a bright light to this event, to all of our lives today. And I can't wait to see you in person again when we do our fall Elevate. So amazing. I've learned a lot. I know we've all learned a lot from this today. So we're going to do an amazing